everyone. I am Christina Lin, and I'm here to tell you why bring your own cloud is the future of cloud service, right? And before we dive into what bring your own cloud is, I just want to do a quick introduction of what Redpanda is in case, I think all of you know what Redpanda is already, but I just want to quickly go over it. If you think about Redpanda, it's a 100% rewrite of Kafka. But instead, we're using C++ instead of using a lot of JVMs. Think about it like this. I don't want to go into like technical details on things because you can read about it on a blog post. But basically, think about driving a car. You know, cars been around for a lot of years, right? And you got different engines, right? You got diesel engines, you've got petrol engines, and now we have electronic engines. And there's always a way of progression in technology to make it more efficient, a lot faster, and to deliver things. And this is what Redpanda is. We're letting people doing streaming using exactly the same way of how they use it, but with a better engine, with less management. And that is why we're rewriting everything in C++, because we're getting rid of all that virtualization for you, right? You don't have to worry about JVM garbage collections. You don't have to worry about OS page cache. If things goes wrong, then everything's gone, like in memory as well, right? And you don't have to think about like 10 different shell scripts when you're trying to communicate to your Kafka cluster because we give you one single CLI tool that's gonna do everything for you. And it comes with all the auto rebalancings and all that stuff you need from enterprise level content. We also come with tier storage where we're gonna offload all that, you know, like retention limited data to a cheaper object store, right? So that is what Redpanda is. You're getting all the capabilities, every single one of them is more reliable with Redpanda, and I'm very proud to be a Redpanda myself, right? But then let's go into what BYOC is, right? Currently in the market, there's two different offerings. You've got self-hosted. With self-hosted, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. All of us who have self-hosted a Kafka cluster knows all this pain of, you know, provisioning it, patching it, upgrading it, making sure you're not getting data loss, doing backups and scaling. All of that is up to your team to do it. And there's always pros and cons, right? The pros is always, you always have complete, you know, control access. You have complete control of your data. We call it data sovereignty, right? But then there's cons, there's problems when you have a longer ramp up time because, to be honest with you, think about all the things that needs to be done, like in the self-hosted that I just showed you before. You have to have the team that is capable of doing all that, right? Like, and helping you doing all that and planning out all the resource and doing all that, so it has a longer ramp up time. And then you have a lot more operational costs as well. Where you have a managed service comes with everything that it promises. It's flexible, you got SLAs, you've got, you know, nice dashboard, flexible storages, always stay up to date because they patch things for you, right? That's awesome. It increased flexibilities. It's, you know, you're gonna get very little operation needs, right? But it comes with problems of lack of transparencies. You have limited to your data control. Basically, you don't control where the data is, right? I always have this analogy of self-hosted and managed services. Self-hosted is like you're cooking everything yourself at your house. You control all the food that you eat. You control the way you cook it. You can cook it as much like the way you like it. If you want it to be salty, savory, you know, add more salt, right? If you wanna, and you know the source of your food, right? You know where it's coming from, so you know where everything is. And then if you think about managed service, it's more like going to a restaurant, right? You get the food served to you right away. It's great, right? And then it's very nicely done. It's in the right portion of what you want to have it. But you never know what's going on in the back of the kitchen. Where are they sourcing their food? Are they storing their food properly? How are they cooking everything? How do you know they're doing it properly? You got no idea, right? And then we see people doing those two deployment options. They were asking if we can have something that kind of works both ways, right? And that is what Bring Your Own Cloud, BYOC, is for. I kind of often refer it as the catering service, right? So you got the benefit of a chef, a team of chefs that goes into your house, and you see where all your 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 food is prepared, you see everything, everything's transparent to you, and you got your meal of how you liked it, right? So BYOC is kind of that level of convenience and also brings you that flexibility as well. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get the benefit of all the SLAs, and you get experts doing the operational things for you, and you also get a committed spend or provider discount because you're billed directly by your providers. So what do we do with BYOC? We basically will deploy our cluster, we'll help you, we'll deploy the cluster into your cloud instead of deploying in our cloud. I'll show you a little bit of architecture later, but this is what's going on with redpanda right now. We have 1/3 of our customer adopting this type of deployment options. They often start with either, oh, I wanted to have a self-hosted version because we are so concerned about privacies. And then we have another type of customer who was like, I don't want anything to do with like managing everything. I wanted to, everything would be all organized for me. But they end up going into BYOC because first of all, they like it because the data are owned by themselves. They have they own all the access to their data, and redpanda would have nothing to do with it. So they love that, and we have quotes, and you also get benefits of the performance you get with redpanda as well, right? So that's why we see a lot of users adopting this. Well, but it's not that easy to actually get a cluster running in your cloud, right? Because you gotta have the infrastructure set up. You gotta have Kubernetes. Sometimes people like Kubernetes because it's easy to scale, right? You gotta set up your own network, like VPCs and all that, configure that. And then sometimes you gotta have your objects stored, and then you gotta think about like how many disks you're gonna assign for each broker, right? Because you're gonna retain it. And then sometimes you need to offload it to a tier storage. So you need all this to be set up and monitor and maintain and doing all the upgrades in your own cloud. And then you also have to assign policies as well. And then you also have to patch it. And then you also have to add more, scale it. And then sometimes things goes wrong. So how do we do that without having a person have access to your cloud because of all the privacy problems or all the security issues, right? Is it possible for us to go and directly go into your cluster? Well, that's not the best way of doing things because once you open up that port, you're gonna have, attacks, you're gonna have unwanted attentions, going into your cluster. So maybe that's not the best way of applying bring your own cloud. So in redpanda, I think what we did is pretty brilliant because we figured out a way to do BYOC in a more secure way. Right? The way we did it is we'll have you, the user, using our CLI tool. That is a very simple tool to set up an agent in your account with your own credentials. So redpanda doesn't see any of your credentials at all because the user is going to set up that agent. So what's going on is this agent is going to set up everything for you in your own cloud. So redpanda has no access to that. So, but how does redpanda gonna manage everything for you, right? Using this type of architecture? Well, there must be a way. So the agent, instead of sending requests or manage it directly into your cluster, it's going to start pulling instructions and actions or activities from redpanda control plane. We call it control plane because it's kind of the control center of things. And then it's going to do the operational stuff on top of your own cluster. So instead of sending in commands directly into your cluster, you are actually pulling it. So there's a sense of security there. The only data that's going out to the control plane is the monitoring metrics, right? And some audit log, because we have to kind of see how your these are like broker performances log and stuff like that, because we have to know if something goes wrong with your broker, we have to notify you or to kind of figure out things, right? So these are the only thing that's going out. Well, so what the user is going to use is a dashboard. The dashboard is built on top of our control plane. But the problem is sometimes the data owner wants to see what's going on inside the cluster. And we have a very nice UI to see that. But the thing is, if you're using the dashboard to view all the data, then are we sending the data into the dashboard and get to your place? That's not all right, because that's not okay. So we figured out a very genius way of embedding the two things together, so that when users try to see all the data in their own cluster, what they would do is the entire traffic is actually going from the user directly to the broker itself, so the data never ever goes to the control plane. So everything was served internally from the cluster. And when we deploy things, if you look closely into the network itself, you have different choices of where you want to deploy the cluster. You can deploy it into a new VPC, or you can deploy it into the same existing VPCs of what you have, right? And that is really good, right? Because then it's closer to your workload, right? So it's closer to your workload. And another thing is, what happens if the agent failed? Like, if something goes wrong with the agent, what's going on? Well, the thing is, because the cluster is running independently by itself, so it is not going to just fly on its own. Basically, your cluster will still be running, and then when the agent comes back up, it's going to do all the operation, continues to do its work, right? That's the architecture of how we built it. Another good thing about this kind of architecture is that if you ever decided to not go with Red Panda BYOC or bring your own cloud solutions, you can just cut everything off, but then your cluster and your data is still within your cloud. You still own everything, right? So that you have 100% control of what's inside, and you still have everything running, right? So that is good. Another thing that we do is when there's ever a problem, there's always going to be a need for us to go into your cluster to help you with. And we have implemented a lot of security level things into the cluster. So not only we do like dynamic secrets, so making sure that there's no one credential stored somewhere, we also have this zero trust access, where every single time when there's a Red Panda expert needs to access your cluster, you log and see how, and maybe operate on things and finding what's wrong, what's going on with your cluster. Everything is going through a proxy, which is going to assign a session that is going to be a temporary session, allow them to work in a certain level of time, and everything that they do will be recorded. Every log they do will be recorded, so people knows what's in. So every single thing that they do will be monitored. And the thing is, when the way that they access your cloud environment will be a reverse tunnel, so there's no traffic going in and trying to access your data outside as well. But to implement all this is not that easy. There's a lot of things that needs to be done on the control plane side as well, right? So, because like in Red Panda, we want you to upgrade on your own speed, on your own pace, right? So that is why we have a lot of the release pipelines. You get to decide when you want to upgrade your cluster, and that causes a lot of management dependencies that we need to do. So there's a lot of things that has gone into the release pipeline in our BYOC solutions, where we have to, first of all, of course, always code quality controls. We scan all the containers that we deploy on top of your cloud, so everything is well scanned. We make sure all the dependencies, so dependencies is a very different thing here, because we're working with a lot of different cloud providers. Cloud providers has different solutions, they have different versions. So we want to make sure that all the combinations, versions that we support are well tested when we deploy on top of your cloud. So we have all that and versions controlled inside our cloud as well. And then we also have workflow. And workflow is another thing that needs to be done, because everything has to be, because all the activities, sometimes they're dependent on each other. So we want to make sure whenever we know where each customers are, and all the activities that we ask the cluster to do are monitored, and they are in a workflow that we know what they're doing, right? So what is the user experience looks like when we built that thing, right? So basically, the user doesn't have to do a lot when they want to spin up a BYOC cluster. First of all, the first thing is they have to provision an appropriate access to their credentials. So every single time when you want to start, all you need to do is just give the agent that was deployed in your cloud appropriate access so it can provision all the things that's needed to actually get the cluster running. But that was kind of the only thing you need to set up for. And then you can decide on the preference of how you want the cluster to run on. There's a couple of different things you get to do. You get to decide when running BYOC, right? First of all, which providers you're working with. Are you working with Amazon? Are you working with Google? And Azure is coming very soon. And different regions, which regions you want to deploy on. And then what is your availability? How's your HA policy? Do you want to be in a single availability zones, or do you want to have multiple available, right? So it depends on where they are. And also, your throughput, right? So the throughput kind of determines like different tiers, levels of services that you're being promised to. So these are the things you kind of have to figure out. And also, do you want your cluster to be available externally, or do you want it to be all inside within your VPC so it doesn't have any external connections? And then, do you want it to be inside inside your VPCs, or and do you want to set your VPC peerings and all that kind of stuff? Just kind of figure out here. And once you've done that, then all you need to do is initiate the deployments, and then you get a Red Panda cluster running in your cloud with controllers on the left-hand side, and then your cluster running on the right-hand side, right? And that is all I have to say about why BYOC is the best architecture that in the future. Anyway, another thing, like I was told by marketing that everybody needs to be at booth 203 tomorrow because we're doing a raffle. If you're wearing our t-shirts to the booth at 1 p.m. tomorrow, well, you will get a chance to win an expense-paid trip to any place in the world that has Red Panda in there. I'm talking about Japan. I'm talking about we're in New Zealand and any places that has Red Panda in there. We're gonna have it. We're gonna have you be there, expense paid, and check out the Red Panda over there. And I hope that makes everybody happy, right? And so a quick reminder of the user experience. So basically, you're starting from setting up your cloud, then you choose all the options you want to have, then you have the thing ready. And that is what BYOC is the future of cloud services. Thank you.